Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, we got to thank Thomas Jefferson for 62 degrees of charming temperature. No wind, overcast, was raining, isn't now, might come on, might have to stop. The news is sensational. We have a powerful Circuit Court of Appeals saying what we all knew to be true without having had argument and having them spend the time to tell us this. And it is that, you're not endowed with limitless power that allows you to go so far, even as to kill your enemies using the Navy SEALs. That seems obvious, doesn't it? And what kind of an example could you be if the rule was otherwise? But we had a Supreme Court argument on whether a person who supported an insurrection, not a member of the court said anything about it. How is that possible? And there was a kind of a side, like it suggested maybe one or two members of the court didn't even think it was an insurrection, it was just a riot. So the one man in the room who called it what it was the counsel arguing on behalf of the state to bar Trump from being on the ballot, as per Article 14, Section 3. And what were the arguments in opposition? And I won't go over them again, but what they were a distraction, like a magician, deflecting your interest elsewhere, as if what they were talking about was good and sufficient to allow a man who had tried to overthrow the government to run for president, to give him another opportunity to clean up his criminal act. And we're supposed to take that as a given and accept that? There are several ways to describe these techniques. For example, that, if we allow Colorado to express its view in support of barring Trump and invoking Article 4, Section 3 that says if you took an oath to support the government and you haven't done it, then you can be barred from office after that. And that was not the discussion. The discussion was, hey, other states would feel beholden to follow what was going on in Colorado, but there's no requirement that that happen. They could each decide differently or decide nothing at all or not even have a case. So they were so terrorized by the thought of doing what the Constitution said that they offered these other reasons that didn't have any weight to avoid doing what they should be doing. So that's why I say 6 members of the court are hacks. Now the question is, what about the other 3? Are they going to go along on some crazy theory that, if we tell the people this is okay, then we will stabilize the nation? No, the nation knows what this man did. They know how evil he is, how traitorous he is, what he intends to do if he becomes president. And we're going to let that go by the by. So one of the words that I like, which I've used in a recent brief, was fuzzify. And what it means is to take something that's distinct and make it indistinct. So the foul misconduct of Trump is not a get out of jail card. And we see the same craziness going on in connection with the House. Green thought we should impeach the head of the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, because she doesn't like what's happening at the border, and it would help Trump, and so on. They presume that an inarticulate, uneducated mass out there will make him president without realizing that they're being led down a false primrose path to compromise and perhaps destroy our nation as a republic and a democracy. So that's one of the things that bear down upon us that we have to act on. Also, Congress and the Republican conference, they apparently don't even know what votes they have. And having participated in what they call whipping a vote, I know that you usually have an exact and precise number of who's going to be for something and whether you should put it up to vote because you have the votes. That's not going on. So when you fuzzify and you invoke alternate facts and you don't do the hard work and you don't do it by policy and logic and investigation, but you do it by power and emotion, moving the uneducated to believe what you're telling them is true and that you're about to save them, well, that's just not the way it works. So we have a situation in which our country's at risk because people are lying all the time and trying to move the people to do something not in their best interest. So that's what I have to say about the court and Congress. Take care. So now there are a number of other issues, but one that's going to haunt us, it's going to haunt everybody, is what do we do about farming? Now there are protests across Europe right now, and there are issues involved, but you know, these problems didn't happen overnight. If a country allows imports of inexpensive goods as compared to what the country itself can produce, when the labor that produces the goods is scandalous and unethical, then you've created a squeeze play, okay? Now, farming has a predictability problem. What happens when you have a bad season? So we see that farmers are underwritten with support, usually from the government, for those years when they're out of sync. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, but now the farmers, particularly in Europe, are complaining about high costs and competition from others who can undersell them, making them too expensive. So, how much is the government giving them now? $60 billion. $60 billion. And there's a proposal that may be working that France has provided of an additional $160 million. The farmers in response are literally hurling shit and deteriorating bales and blocking the roadways and burning at least one statue that honors an industrialist. So we're talking about Germany, France, Belgium, Italy, and Greece. There are eggs thrown at officials and bonfires. It's a full-blown mess. Now, is it a question of arrogance, apologies to the store, that we have one food store which is called Giant? And what do we understand? We have another which is called Food Lion. Maybe those are not smart names. I'm not proposing to change them. And maybe they're more accurate than they were originally intended, because small farmers are getting the living daylights beat out of them. But there's been an additional pressure to the other pressures that have to do with climate. And one of them is, how does European Union, meet its obligations under the climate change agreements so that they reduce by 11% greenhouse gases, and that 11% falls in the category of farming and agriculture. Now, how does EU expect to do that? Well, one thing they hope to do is to require that 4% of the farmland be put in non-production. Another is that the crops be rotated. I mean, these are best practices, but they haven't been done, okay? And we want to stop the use of certain insecticides and pesticides and things like that, because it increases the danger and the problems of having a green policy on top of all the other problems. Now, it is very possible, Macron is a very smart man, that he may find a way to steer this. But this is a tragedy waiting to happen, and the pressure is enormous from other nations that are farming, and more cheaply than EU, that we have to do something about the environment, and we'll pay for that in a different way. And we're not there. And it's not just a European problem, it's a problem here as well. And, you know, for a long time we've said pesticides and so forth. Does that explain some of the cancers that we see? Yes, I'm sure. You have to really be a true believer in everything you're told by the industrialist, if you will, to think it's all safe. It can't possibly be safe. And it's more challenging to figure out how to raise things, you know, and if you want the food to look beautiful, it doesn't look so pretty if you do what's necessary to raise it so that it's good for you. So this is a huge, huge problem, and we're busy lying to the public about other things. And this, you know, the little things we do, they're helping the environment when they're not. Now there's, to my way of thinking, a happy story, and it involves Greta Thunberg, the child orator and conservationist and bane to global warming. Now, she was protesting in Great Britain about the proposal by the government to permit oil drilling in the North Sea. And she and others were arrested, and they were prosecuted for protesting. By the way, this genius, and I mean this seriously, this genius woman is 21. So she's got years of ingenuity and service to come. The judge in the case, John Law, isn't that a great name? Isn't that so perfect? Decided that the evidence was insufficient, the notice was insufficient, there were so many defects in the arrest that they were all vitiated, thrown out, and they released those who were charged as violating the law. In addition, there was a direction that their lawyers' fees were to be paid, and Thunberg traveled back home to Sweden. That also had to be paid for. So I like that result. That's really good. It takes me back to my days as a student at Columbia, where there were riots there. And when I say riots, now that I'm more educated in the variations, it was really a protest called a riot, and the protest was about what Columbia was doing and failing to do, both with regard to minority relations and with regard to supporting war through the international school and other places. And SDS, of all the bodies that we had, some consider unreliable, occupied the university president's office and found evidence of these things. So it was a mess, and I was one of the people recruited to help restructure the university. So I got to look at how difficult that is. And years later, the police officer at the time, I don't know if he was a second deputy or whatever, wonderful man, but he was in charge of all the police coming onto the campus and dragging students down the steps of the university, putting them in buses and taking them away. And so we had long conversations about this. So at a young age, I got a chance to understand what some of the issues were. I don't mean I have easy solutions. But one of them was representation, which is ironic if you think about it, given today's problems. And the representation was in the university senate, and the dean of the law school, when I went there from undergraduate to Columbia Law School, they made me a senator. And frankly, I don't remember a single meeting. I suppose less tempestuous is good. So, clarity of expression. No fuzzification. Evidence, well-meaning, thoughtful discipline, instead of power and emotion, carries the day. So I say goodbye to you for today. Hope to be out tomorrow in my cathedral of trees, and I'm waiting for them now to turn to the spring and to explode with brilliance, and it will happen soon. All the best. Bye-bye.